Hello, Wobbly Phil here. So, you want to own a classic motorcycle? You dream of exhilarating rides on sunny summer days as your gleaming steed purrs effortlessly through the twists and turns of a country road to nowhere in particular. You park up outside a roadside cafe or at a beauty spot, and hordes of admirers gather round to marvel at your shiny chrome and freshly polished paintwork. Well, dream on, sunshine. I'm here to tell you the handful of admirers you attract will invariably be grizzled men over 70, and that's only if you actually make it to the cafe or beauty spot without breaking down. The vast majority of folk you ride past are too young to even know what your machine is, or give a flying fuck that you've spent the entire winter in your garage fiddling with carburetors, changing spark plugs, tinkering with the timing, and rubbing the metal bits with an industrial-sized tub of Autosol until you can see your face in them. You see, I've owned classic motorcycles and still do. I've owned classic motorcycles when they were, in fact, brand new motorcycles. I'm that old. And it's not all it's cracked up to be. Don't get me wrong, it can be very rewarding on the few days in the UK when the weather is perfect and your classic bike is actually running. Otherwise, I wouldn't still be doing it. But you know, I can't help wondering if all the expense, time and trouble is worth it for those few moments of pleasure. So I'm here to give you some insight based on my ownership history. It's purely personal, and not everyone will have had the same experience. I bought my first old classic machine in the early 1990s. I'd always lusted after a Norton Commando, and through a mutual friend I discovered Kev the Rev's Commando was up for sale. A relative bargain for £3,400. This bike had issues, despite only being 20 years old at the time. It was smoking badly from one cylinder, but it ran after a fashion. No problem, I thought. I'll get one of those shops that specialise in classic bikes to fix it. Classic bike shops. What can I say about classic bike shops? Sorry to disappoint, but I'm not going to name names in this video because it's not meant to be a personal vendetta. Besides, there are some good guys out there if you do your research and are persistent. But it was clear that the first bunch of knob jockeys I took the Commando to knew absolutely diddly squat about Commandos, even though they said they did. On the 2-mile ride back from the shop to my workplace after they'd fixed it with a rebore and new piston rings, the thing actually burst into flames. I had to rush into work and grab a fire extinguisher before the petrol tank went up. Turned out they'd introduced a short circuit into the wiring loom, which had heated up and set fire to the electrics and then the fuel line. So to get that sorted, I subsequently chose a more reputable workshop, well known in the classic bike community. It came back fine, but within days had thrown the primary chain going up a hill. The chain burst through the metal primary chain case, smashing it to bits and causing the back wheel to seize up. Luckily, I wasn't going very fast. Fed up, I did some research on the proto-internet and found a man who was deemed to be the authority on Commandos. He was based a long way away, involving transporting the bike, and he wasn't very cheap, but he was indeed the best. He looked after this bike for the next decade and more, and although it never really started easily, it was reliable when it did. I ended up producing a video with this fine gentleman. One day I might put it on this channel, if I can find the DVD. Eventually, I sold the Commando and moved on to modern retro classics, which were becoming the thing in the early 2000s. I owned an utterly gutless 2002 Triumph Bonneville, which was humiliating every time I went on a dual carriageway. Grannies in Ford Fiestas would breeze past me while I struggled to do 60. Then I bought a brand new Royal Enfield Cafe Racer, which was so lame that it actually felt dangerous on anything other than a B road. Even on B roads, it was a liability. It once slid out from under me doing less than 20 around a corner. The build quality was crap too, despite the glossy marketing photos. It had to go.
Kawasaki lets the good times roll. Kawasaki lets the good times roll. Get aboard, get aboard.
I still missed the Commando and regretted selling it. Maybe another classic would scratch that itch. Like many men my age, I'd always wanted a Kawasaki Z1. Of course, it had been beyond my financial reach as a teenager when it was launched, but now, maybe... Well, Z1s were already fetching silly prices in 2015, but their close cousins, the Z900s, had been somewhat neglected and were consequently much more affordable. I found a reputable dealer that had an example for sale at £5,000, a bargain. This machine had recently been bored out and fitted with a new set of oversized pistons. Now, whoever did this must have had all the mechanical skills of an iceberg lettuce. One of the 4 cylinders smoked so much you could have made kippers with what was coming out of the back end. And eventually, of course, the plug got so oiled up that the 4-cylinder green machine was effectively a triple. When I complained to the morons who had sold it to me, they kept telling me I needed to put running in oil in it. Yeah, right. I contacted a repair shop that specialised in Japanese inline 4s, and they quoted me £5,000 to fix it, what I'd paid for the bike in the first place. Oh, and there was a year-long waiting list. But the lust for an old bike never leaves you, so I did it again in 2019. This time it was another of my teenage idols, a 1975 Triumph Trident. But that, I think, is a story for another day. So, what have I learnt? Nothing really. I keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, but it's always the same. Unless you have the mechanical skills, which I don't, take it from me, a classic bike is a money pit. I've literally spent tens of thousands on fixing them, and I've only managed about a dozen days each year actually riding them. You see, no matter how skilled many grease monkeys who take your money claim to be, they're mostly interested in pocketing your dosh and laughing all the way to the bank. And don't imagine you'll escape penury if you buy a classic machine that's advertised as restored. In some circumstances, restored can mean fucked up beyond recognition. Remember, it may look shiny on the outside, but it's what you can't see on the inside that counts. Mr. Bodger, with his buggering bodgery, will almost certainly have been at work at some point over the past 50 years, and a restoration will often only be cosmetic. And forget anyone advertising a classic bike as an investment. Remember that Norton Commando I bought in the early 90s for £3,400? For one in similar condition today, a sensible price would be not much more than double that. So it's just about kept pace with inflation if you don't add on the countless thousands you'll have spent on repairs, insurance, security, maybe renting a garage, and all the hand-woven organic wool blankets you lovingly cover it with each winter to prevent condensation on chilly nights from turning your precious metal into an Alka-Seltzer dipped in iron brew. All that said, this cautionary tale is really meant to inform, not put you off. I may sound jaded, I am jaded, but if you really do have your heart set on a classic motorcycle, go for it. Just be aware that you'll probably need deep pockets and your dream might turn into a nightmare. But regardless, you will make friends with an awful lot of elderly gentlemen. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, then please consider liking and subscribing to let YouTube's algorithm know we're doing something right here at 3 Phils. Thank you.